Welcome to my channel, The Binge Eating Therapist. I'm Sarah, former binge eater turned psychotherapist, and my mission is to use this space to bring content to you to help you understand your struggle with food and break free from binge eating. Today I want to talk about the thoughts that we don't talk about. Binge eating is not just a behaviour, there's a lot of mental noise that goes on around food, a lot of disordered thinking, maybe. I don't know if I like that phrase particularly. But there are thoughts that we recognise are not helping us, and they seem to go against our values and the kind of people that we want to be. But the thoughts I want to talk about today, I've had all of these myself. I've spoken to many people who have shared that they also have had these thoughts. So I'm going to guess that most, if not all of you, will relate to at least some of these. The first thought that I want to mention is the thought, I wish I had anorexia instead of binge eating. I get it. It can seem really appealing to have the eating disorder that makes you thin. And in my thinking at the time when I was struggling with binge eating, I was thinking, I'm pretty sure I'd find it easier to recover from anorexia than I do binge eating. And the thing is, we don't know. And as someone who's now worked with anorexia, I have a much better understanding of what it is and the terror and the fear that people live in when they're struggling with anorexia. And I used to read all of those anorexia memoirs. They sometimes call it anorexia porn. And sometimes I would almost be trying to evoke a switch from binge eating into anorexia or some kind of restrictive eating problem instead. And I just want to say, if you struggle with binge eating that feels so out of control, no wonder what looks like the complete opposite of where you are looks really appealing. So I think if that thought is there, you can just notice it and recognize it. It doesn't mean anything about you that you have this thought, other than your brain is trying to make comparisons between other eating disorders and trying to convince you that that would be an easier problem to have. It's very easy to do that, looking at other problems that people have, and it's not a problem that we have, and think, oh, I wish I had those problems because I'd be able to fix them. But if you were able to fix them, then they would never be your problem in the first place, right? The second thought that I wanted to share with you is one that seems to be pretty ungenerous to other people, but it's that situation where somebody you know, maybe someone close to you, is dieting and losing weight and seem to be doing it very successfully. And you might be in that place where you've realized that diets don't work, or they certainly don't work for you, and you have that thought, I hope they regain the weight, and so that they find that out too. And we feel uncomfortable having this thought because it seems to be about wanting someone else's downfall, but ultimately it's about what it means to you. So what it means if somebody seems to be able to diet successfully and not have the rebound binging that you do, it's going to set your brain off telling you that you should be able to do this. So what it is triggering your own insecurity and your own shame about the problem that you have. And so we project that on other people and we go, well, I need them to have the same experience as me in order for my experience to be legitimate. And I get that. Again, I think it's really human, and I've definitely had that unkind and not very generous thought about other people, and I've heard other people share the same thing with me as well. So if you are thinking that at the moment about someone in your life, or you have done, it may not be that you really want anyone else to be unhappy. You're just trying to legitimize your own pain. And the third one, which I think actually I've heard it in across the culture, not just with people struggling with binge eating, and it's simply this: I wish I could get ill in order to lose weight. And I think this thought just speaks to the level of distress about where you're at now. If you're having this, that you would rather be physically ill and losing weight than where you are now. I remember my mind taking me to some pretty dark places about what I believed I was willing to go through in order for my body to shrink. And it wasn't just for my body to shrink, it was because I felt so out of control around food. So if there was some kind of physical barrier through ill health that meant I couldn't eat or I couldn't binge, then that to me just felt like a relief because I was no longer fighting with myself. It was that distressing and uncomfortable to keep fighting every day than to just surrender to an illness. So yeah, part of it was like this idea that my body will be smaller, and then it almost feels like a reset, right? And I don't know what it is that convinces us that if we got ill and our body shrunk, that then our food and binging would just vanish as a result of that. So I think it goes a little bit further than just changing our body, but I think that might be the part that the mind fixates on, because so often the weight and the size of our body seems to be the problem, not the food. And this belief we even probably see in other areas of our culture and in our lives. Is there anyone in your life that's had a stomach bug or diarrhea and vomiting, and they announce how much weight that they've lost as a result of that quite proudly? So this is something that I think is around for a lot of people, not just those of us that might be struggling with binge eating. But I think the fact that the brain thinks it is preferable to be physically unwell and not be able to eat than to struggle with binge eating, for me is just a testament to the level of distress that there is around this problem. This is a tough problem to have. The fourth and final thought is probably the darkest of all, and it's simply, I don't want to live like this. Like, if this is the deal and I've got to struggle with this every day, I don't want to be here. I don't want to live my life. I did a video, I'll link to it above and below, where I read from my binge eating journals back from years ago, and something about reading them back, I remember when I wrote it at the time thinking if I read it back in the future I would be horrified at how bad things had got and how the thoughts that I was having. But actually that wasn't my experience at all. Reading it back in the future, all those dark thoughts that I was having at the time, for me just really validated my memory of it. I'd got to a point where I was thinking, you know, am I exaggerating just how awful it really was, that feeling of not wanting to live? So having that record in my diaries of what it was like really not wanting to live, for me was just incredibly sad. But I remember like those shadows of how that felt is still there, so I know what that was like. And I think there's a belief in that it's around a hopeless despair that things won't get better. It's like I didn't have this belief when I was imagining things could get better. It was when I was really stuck in that hole and thinking that I was incapable of changing, I didn't know what to do, so my mind was predicting that the rest of my life was going to feel like this, and I was like, I don't want it. You can keep your life, I don't want it. I was never actively suicidal, but I certainly wished to no longer exist. And this one is going to be hard for anyone else in your life or anyone watching this who hasn't struggled with this to understand what really you're struggling with food, and that makes you not want to live. But again, it's not about the struggle with food, it's about what goes on up here. I really, really did not like myself. And most of that dislike came because of the binging. Didn't like the fact I binged. It was against everything that I wanted to value. It felt just so out of control. So I want to say self-absorbed, and I don't mean that in a judgmental way. I just think when we're hurting, our attention moves inwards, and it's really hard to get perspective or clarity when we're in pain. So these thoughts, they all come from a painful place. So rather than judging the thoughts, maybe it's about having a bit of compassion for the painful place that they're coming from. And I'm conscious now that this video hasn't been about advice, and it hasn't even necessarily sounded particularly hopeful, but there is hope. I've done plenty of other videos about recovery and the recovery process, because I do believe recovery is possible. And I believe it's possible for everyone. I think we have to define what recovery means, but that certainly sounds like another video. Anyway, if nothing else, I hope this video helps you to feel seen and find a little bit more compassion for yourself. So, go well, and I will see you on the next video.